came along. Well, thank you. Oh, recording. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. I didn't click it sooner.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to repeat the stuff I said. So, although I'm at an age where I probably will repeat everything 2 or 3 times. But yeah, Woody Allen was a revelation to me as well, because his movies were incredibly funny, and he was this Jewish nerd. You know, he was a guy who I could sort of identify with. There weren't a lot of those type of characters, certainly on television or in the movies. Well, okay, Cary Grant. All right, yes, Cary Grant. But I always thought of Cary Grant as Jewish anyway, so that was fine. But those were kind of my influences. Also, Mel Brooks, who did The Producers. And it's like, God, these guys are really funny. And, you know, again, the reason why most Jewish nerds, such as myself, decide to get into comedy is to get girls. And that's really, you know, yeah, to change the world and, you know, to spread Jewish values, et cetera, et cetera. But really, it's to get girls first. Fortunately, I was able to spread Jewish values because it didn't work so well in terms of getting all the girls. But I then went on to become a disc jockey when I got out of college. I was kind of Howard Stern before Howard Stern, and I did that for a couple of years, and no one would let me use my real name. You know, back in the early 70s, no one would let me use my real name. So I was Beaver Cleaver on these various radio stations. And at the time, and I'm getting tired of playing Kung Fu Fighting 4 times a night. At the time, television really had this renaissance of comedy. In the early 70s, you had All in the Family, which was done by Norman Lear, who was Jewish. You had the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was Alan Burns and Jim Brooks, who were Jewish, and a wonderful writer who was on that staff named Treva Silverman, who basically was the voice of Rhoda, who was the voice of a Jewish woman in America in the 70s. And MASH, you had Gene Reynolds and Larry Gelbart, who were both Jewish. So I started leaning towards wanting to do that, as opposed to being in radio and having to sort of disguise who I really was. I wanted to be in an industry that celebrated being Jewish, and also paid a heck of a lot more. And I wouldn't have to play Kung Fu Fighting if I was working on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. So in my head, I started thinking, okay, it's time to start thinking about getting out of radio. And I was in Armed Forces Radio Reserve Unit at the time, because remember the draft, 1969, the first draft, which was based on your birthday. So if you were like number 1 through 125, you were drafted. If you were 126 to 225, depending, and beyond that, you were pretty much free. So I was number 4. That was my draft number. And so I got myself into an Armed Forces Radio Reserve Unit, and I met my partner, David Isaacs, who had just come from Miami and transferred into the department. And one of the things in studying comedy, I started reading all of the plays of Neil Simon and the plays of Herb Gardner and Kaufman and Hart. uh, and just immersing myself in those plays. And again, Neil Simon, this was a time when Neil Simon's plays were so successful and did so much to, again, elevate Jewish characters, because from his first play, Come Blow Your Horn, there were Jewish characters. And I saw that David was reading the biography of George S. Kaufman. We were in summer camp together at Fort Carson, Colorado, and I saw this guy reading the George S. Kaufman biography, which I had read because George S. Kaufman was, one of my playwright idols. And first of all, it's unusual just to see anybody reading a book in the Army, but to read that book. And so we became friends and started talking. And it turns out he too had a desire to be a writer. And so we thought, well, maybe we should do something together. I had no writing experience whatsoever. David had taken one writing class at the University of Miami and got a D in it. So he was like the professor. And when the 2-week Army summer camp was over and we went back to our respective jobs, David was working at ABC in a long since obsolete department called film. And he would ship film cans around to various affiliates. I was working at San Bernardino and then got fired. I would get fired a lot doing radio. So I came back to LA to live with my folks while I sent out more tapes. And I called David and I said, hey, you want to try writing something together? And he said, sure. And so we decided to become a partnership. And that was October 1973. And we are essentially still partners today. And we said, well, what do we write? We thought, well, let's write about college, because that was the sum total of our life experience back in 1973. I was 23 years old, so was he. And I had to go down to Hollywood to a bookstore and get a copy of a TV script, because I didn't even know what a TV script looked like. So we sat down and we wrote this pilot. It was about two dorm roommates, like Woody Allen and Robert Redford. So we could do a lot of Goyim jokes. And we wrote this pilot. It probably would have cost $100 million in 1973 to produce. Again, we had no idea what we were doing. But we enjoyed the process and we enjoyed writing with each other. And then I happened to meet an actual writer who had sold some scripts. And I said, how do you break in? And he said, well, you have to write a script on speculation of an existing show. And so we said, okay, we're going to write a Mary Tyler Moore show, because that was our favorite show. We loved the Mary Tyler Moore show. We loved Rhoda. And what we decided to do, back in those days, there was no videotape. If you wanted to see the Mary Tyler Moore show, you had to be in front of the television Saturday night at 9 o'clock on CBS. So every Saturday night, we would get together and I would hold up a little microphone to the speaker on the television, and we would record the episode. And then we would go back and write a detailed outline of the episode. And we did that week after week after week until eventually we started seeing the patterns and figuring out just how they broke stories. So based on that, we sat down and we wrote our spec Mary Tyler Moore show. And we submitted it to Mary Tyler Moore and they passed on it. And we said, okay, we are serious about this. We are going to take 2 years and just keep writing script after script and hope that somewhere somebody in 2 years is going to recognize that we have a modicum of talent. And so I quit radio. Radio was not really that upset that I was gone. And I got a 9-to-5 job teaching broadcasting at the KISS Broadcasting Workshop. And David and I would write 4 nights a week, and on the weekends, we would work on our scripts. And after every script we finished, we would just start the next one. And after we wrote the Mary Tyler Moore Show, we wrote an episode of Rhoda because we loved Rhoda. And by then she had been spun off to her own show. And so we submitted that to Rhoda, and it was rejected. But the person who rejected it was named Charlotte Brown. And Charlotte is now my neighbor. Charlotte lives 3 doors down from me. And this has been sort of a running joke for like the last 20, 25 years. I'll see Charlotte and I'll go, just read it one more time. Okay, I know there's some problems with the story, but there's some funny stuff in there. Just read it one more time, because I think we could get an assignment. Anyway, we continue to write, and my Jewish mother was playing golf at Braemar one day, and happened to be playing with a gentleman named Gordon Mitchell, also Jewish. And she said, "Oh, my son is a writer. You're a writer? What do you work on?" And he says, "This new show called The Jeffersons." And she says, "Oh, gosh, you know, you should meet my son." And he's, of course, thinking, "Oh, my God, why did I get in this foursome?" But he said to call him. So I did. And he said, "All right, send me a script. If I like the script, I'll have you guys come in and pitch." And so we sent him the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And he called back a week later and loved it and invited us to come in and pitch ideas for the Jeffersons. And long story short, they bought one. So we worked out the outline, and we had 2 weeks to write the script. And wouldn't you know, this was the 2 weeks that summer when our reserve unit had to go on summer camp. And it's not like jury duty where you can just say, "You know what, I'm not feeling it right now. Let me just move it back to October." No, you get on the bus or you're in the brig. So David and I wrote our Jeffersons at night in the barracks at Fort Ord. Everyone else is smoking dope and playing craps and listening to Jimi Hendrix. And he and I are sitting on a bunk going, you know, "Wheezy, come over here." You know, we're writing the Jeffersons. And again, who better than Jews to write the Jeffersons? And and that sort of launched our career. And from there, we did some freelance stuff. We did some stories for Barney Miller, Danny Arnold, who is Jewish, and I think all of those characters, including Jack Sue, were essentially Jewish, were written as Jewish on Barney Miller. But then we got a chance to do MASH, and that was really what really launched our career. And then for MASH, we went on. We did Cheers for 9 years. We created a show for Mary Tyler Moore. We also had a show that was short-lived, but I loved, in 1993, called Big Wave Daves, and it starred Adam Arkin. And basically, it was Wendy and the Lost Boys. It was like a midlife crisis show where 3 guys who are tired of Chicago open a surf shop in Hawaii, and they were Jewish characters. They were clearly Jewish characters. And then we created a show that was on CBS for 2 years called Almost Perfect, that starred Nancy Travis, and I can hear you all applauding. And we had a Jewish character there played by Chip Zien. And unlike a lot of the shows in the early 70s, you talk about cultural appropriation. We had actual Jews play the part of Jews. I always find it interesting that there's like such an uproar if one specific nationality doesn't play the role of that specific nationality, but it was okay. No one had a problem with Valerie Harper and Nancy Walker not being Jewish, and no one had a problem with George Costanza not being Italian, or Doris Roberts or Brad Garrett in Everybody Loves Raymond not being Italian. That was like sort of okay. So anyway, so that was so we actually had Jewish characters. We had Chip Zien and we had Lisa Edelstein, and it was great to be able to sort of write your people, to not have them sort of masked underneath the guise of just normal Christians. I always say MASH, Hawkeye's Jewish. I mean, we wrote him Jewish. I mean, he might as well have gone to the Sunday Minion, because we wrote him Jewish and we didn't care. And Alan understood that delivery and got it and played it that way. And those were all templates that were set up by Larry Gelbart, who was Jewish. Yeah, it was a little weird on Cheers because there were not a lot of Jewish characters. There were elements of Jewish characters in Carla and Frasier and Lilith. Lilith actually was Jewish, but we didn't deal that much with the religion. And on Frasier, well, Eddie was certainly Jewish, but we always maintained that Martin, that the dad, who was able to see through all of the pomposity and everything, that there was an element of Jewish DNA in that particular character.
I'm sorry, I want to jump in just because a few questions are coming in.
Great, okay.
And maybe you'll include these things, but what does it mean when you talk about, these are Jewish characters? Or, we had a discussion actually last month where, we learned the phrases of a schlemiel, a schlemazel. Are you talking about, characters of Jewish people? Are you talking about these folks have good values?
I'm talking about the values and attitudes.
Okay.
Now, in the case of MASH, we sprinkled in a few Yiddish expressions as well, but no, I'm talking about just sort of the Jewish attitudes.
Got it, the Jewish attitudes. And by the way, let me just pile on a few things. One, you called out one of the folks you worked with before, Treva Silverman. She's on today's call. I think you're aware of that, but
yes, I am. Yeah, okay. Treva's on this call.
Fantastic.
She was, so instrumental to the success of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And like I said, Rhoda became such a popular character, and it was through Treva. Treva pretty much was her voice. And when you think that, I would say since the old Goldbergs from the 50s, the Gertrude Berg, Molly Goldberg things from the early 50s, there really hadn't been a Jewish character like that on television. And look, I learned to write Jewish characters kind of by seeing what Treva was doing. So Treva was kind of my mentor without knowing it. she's now going to charge me probably for it. Come back, say, okay, 18 mentor sessions. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, there was another question here, and by the way, please weave these in. This is great content.
Yeah, go ahead. Just bring it on.
Okay, bringing it on. Okay, we have something here. Do you look to include a balance of comedy and heart in your scripts? What other elements do you look to include?
Well, let me just back up and say how important the heart part is. One of the things, I guess, different generations have different forms of comedy and styles change and that type of thing. But I always grew up thinking that these shows need to be funny, but they also need to have heart, and they need to have humanity at their base. And I always felt that, based really, I guess, on the shows that I really responded to, is that more than just finding a character funny, I wanted to care. I wanted to care about that character. And so when a character had some problem that he was wrestling with, I was invested in it. Okay. It was important for me that character solve whatever that problem was. And that comes from writing on a level of humanity. And there is, humor can be snarky, can be mean, can be cruel, and you can get some really big laughs out of mean-spirited comedy. And I think, like, a number of current shows are, in my opinion, mean-spirited, and I just don't find them funny. And I know, millennials and Generation YQ or whatever find these things hilarious. Watching horrible people doing horrible things to each other, they find really hilarious, and I don't. So there was, like, always in my writing, you want to be edgy and you want to be sort of biting. And Larry Gelbart had a great line, said, if you write something and it offends no one, then go back and rewrite it. But still, there was always, I wanted my humor to be more of a positive type of thing. And I wanted my characters, even if, like, say on Cheers, where Carla would be taking shots at people and that sort of thing, but you knew underneath they were like a family. Okay. And that's what families did. But at the end of the day, there was affection for each other. And at the end of the day, they would stand up for each other. And so everything that I have ever tried to write, I've always wanted that humanity to ground it. And again, the humanity comes, I think, out of my Jewish upbringing and Jewish teachings, and the love of family and the love of community and ethics, just doing the right thing, not because it'll stop you from going to hell, but because that's the way to live. So all of those values were sort of underneath my scripts. Nice way of saying I've now totally forgotten the question.
No. Let me take one question out of order, just because you started touch on something. There's a question of noting it's heartwarming. It's so heartwarming to know how comfortable you are with your your Jewishness. It's not always been the case, for many other folks. And can you go a little bit into what is your religious background and upbringing that got you to be comfortable with your Jewishness?
Jewish parents. I grew up Reform in the San Fernando Valley, and prior to that, we lived on Sherborne, like Sherborne and Pico, which was a very Jewish neighborhood. This was like back in 1959, 1960. And I remember going to Carthay Center Elementary School, and it would be Yom Kippur, and 2 people in the entire school would show up because everyone was Jewish. And then we moved to the West San Fernando Valley, and I went to Taft High, and it was a middle-class, fairly Jewish neighborhood there too. So I grew up kind of immersed in that. My wife, Debbie, is very Jewish. She grew up in New York, much more Jewish than I did, conservative and all. And, we like I said, we've been members. We were members of this temple when Rabbi Wolpe used to do the high holiday services up in the gym back in those days when he was like a junior rabbi. And we were like, God, I like that guy. Let's go see that guy again next year. Yeah. So, that's, reform being pulled towards conservatism.
No, thank you for that background. Another question came in. Could you describe your experiences of writing on the Tony Randall Show? Since Tony was known to be very quirky, and if you can also weave in, is that a Jewish aspect? Is it something else? But if you could elaborate.
Okay, well, first of all, Tony Randall was Jewish, by the way, a Jew from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we got along, I got along great with Tony, but it was kind of a rough beginning. We had written a script. We'd gotten an assignment to write a Tony Randall Show. And based on our script, the producers, Tom Patchett and Jay Tarsus, Jay is Jewish, hired us on staff. So the first week we go on staff, they're going to do our script. And there had been a week's hiatus before that. And so we're all sitting around the table. We're very excited. It's our script. And before we start, Tony says, I want to make a little speech before we begin. He said, I was just over in London last week during the hiatus. And while in London, I got the opportunity to watch some of those British situation comedies. And after watching those British sitcoms, I can say uncategorically that what we do here is shit. Okay, let's go. And here's Tony Randall Show by Ken Levine and David Isaac. Like, thank you, Tony. That was like a wonderful introduction. But he was a really good guy. And at the time I was single. And so I would bring dates to the filming. Again, this was all about trying to get girls. And after the show, I would bring my date down to the stage and introduce her to the various cast members and stuff. And I would introduce her to Tony. And Tony would always go, oh my God, we could not do this show without Ken. The best jokes in this week's episode were all Ken's. He's just invaluable. So that impressed them. Like, who can say that Tony Randall was your wingman? Okay. But yeah, he was very interesting. He was very interesting. You couldn't smoke around him. He was very particular that nobody could smoke, but he was incredibly professional. He memorized the entire script. He knew everybody else's line. If somebody else screwed up a line, Tony had their line. Yeah, he was really amazing.
So what you're saying, when he was acting with Jack Klugman, and I guess Klugman would always throw his cigar on the ground, and Tony Randall would pick it up with the point on his umbrella. That was more a personal aspect that came out in his writing there.
Well, I mean, that's the character of Felix Unger, but Tony did embody some of those aspects. Yeah.
Okay, another question came in, and you know, you have a lot of fans, a lot of folks who have great deep pedigree in these sitcoms. Someone wrote, I agree that the Dick Van Dyke Show was also their favorite, brilliantly written, and the cast as well, as Everyone Loves Raymond. What was your favorite episode you ever wrote for which show? And I think the question is focusing on Everybody Loves Raymond and validating that Dick Van Dyke was amazing. So.
Well, I never wrote on Everybody Loves Raymond. I directed episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond. I would say of all of the episodes that we have written, probably an episode of MASH called Point of View, which was a whole episode seen through the eyes of a patient, and the patient gets shot, gets injured on the battlefield, and we take them on a helicopter ride to the 4077, and he experiences what MASH is like. That was kind of a groundbreaking episode, and I would say that would probably be my favorite.
Oh, fantastic. And let's build a little bit on. What is your favorite episode that you wrote? And with the commentary of, is it harder to write physical comedy or written?
It's not hard to write physical comedy if you're writing for Lucille Ball. It might be harder to write physical comedy for Savannah Guthrie, but I personally, I mean, I like doing physical comedy as long as I've got good people doing it. But I tend to be more of a verbal person, and I tend to enjoy really writing creative, funny dialogue.
Is there a favorite episode that you wrote from the myriad of sitcoms that sticks out?
Well, Point of View, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And Frasier, we wrote an episode, and we needed to do it fast too. We wrote this in 2 days, called Room Service. And this was the episode where Niles sleeps with Lilith. And the last half of the episode is Frasier arriving at the hotel and them all discussing as 3 psychiatrists what the meaning is and everything. And I would say that's probably my favorite show. I'm really proud of that show.
Fantastic. Do you ever get writer's block? And if so, how do you get through it?
The only time I really had writer's block, when we did that show for Mary Tyler Moore, and it was an unpleasant experience. And we worked long hours, like around the clock. And by the time it was over, I was pretty burned out and just spent a few months like doing nothing. And then we got a call from the Charles brothers at Cheers, do we want to write an episode of Cheers? I'm like, okay. And when I was driving to the lot to start writing that episode, I thought to myself, what if nothing comes? What if I'm still so burned out that I can't do this? And that was close to a panic attack, because what else could I do? I won't be a disc jockey again, play Kung Fu fighting anymore. And when David and I sat down and started writing the script, and the way we work is we dictate the script. We have a writer's assistant in the room who takes shorthand, and we just talk out the script. And when ideas were coming to us and we were sort of moving forward, it was a huge relief. It was kind of like Superman when they take the kryptonite away, you know, and he can feel his powers returning. So that was really the only example. I've always been curious about writer's block. And I've asked like a number of people how you get through it, therapists, blah, blah, blah. And one person had a really interesting idea. He said, get a piece of paper and start writing about writer's block. Just start writing about what you are feeling and how hard it is for the ideas to come and blah, blah, blah. And just sitting there writing and writing and writing will help unlock you, and it will help get you over writer's block.
No, it's fantastic. The questions are pouring in. What is the most difficult episode that you wrote? And if you could explain why.
The most difficult episode. I don't remember the specifics. When we were on MASH, we would make 25 episodes a year. And obviously some are better than others. And there was usually one episode that was just snake bitten. That just didn't work. We were rewriting and maybe we patched this, but at the end of the day, it was not a great idea in the first place. And we have this show that was sort of a turkey, and we would call that our Oscar show, because MASH was on Monday nights at 9 o'clock. And if you remember back in the 70s, the Oscars used to be on ABC on Monday nights. So we knew we're going to have to put a show up against the Oscars and we're going to get killed in the ratings. We had our Oscar show. But it's like when you go through the course of a season, you just expect you're going to have one or two that are troublesome. You're going to have a couple that you have to just throw out. You have the table reading and you just go, this is terrible. We have to just start and write a whole new script tonight. And over a course of a season, that's going to happen. In the same way as during the course of a baseball season, there's going to be a 17-inning game. There's going to be a day when there's rain and then it stops, and then it rain and it stops, and you're there at the ballpark for 9 hours. It's just going to happen, and you just have to roll with it. But yeah, there are some episodes that I'd still like to go back and take another pass at. And unfortunately, now that MASH is on 42 times a day and everything, those Oscar shows get played just as often as the great shows. And like, I cringe sometimes when I go, ooh, Tea and Empathy is on. Ugh, I'm not gonna watch that.
Let's continue. This is fantastic. Do you show your scripts to writer friends for feedback and additional jokes? And does that ever change your story or any of your thoughts?
In writing television, no. In writing television, and of course, part of this is that I had a partner. And so we would write the script, and when it met our standards and was to our satisfaction, we turned it in. When I write by myself, and I've been writing plays for 20 years, there are like 4 or 5 writers who I really trust, my partner being one of them. And again, Treva Silverman. Treva is my dramaturge, and Treva will read my stuff, and she's, God bless her, she's very honest. So when she says she likes something, when she says something works, it means something to me, because there was a play that I gave her, and she called me up and said, "Oh, the first act is wonderful. This is really a great idea." I said, "Yeah." She says, "You have no second act. Your second act does not work at all." And I was, you try stuff. I don't know, maybe this will work. And I threw out the second act. I just threw it out and wrote a whole new second act. And that play got produced at the Falcon Theater. I've gotten a lot of productions of that play. Had I gone with my first draft and the bad second act, I think it would have died a horrible death. So yes, there are writers like Treva who I really trust.
Oh, that's amazing. I think this next question might continue on to that thought. So when you write a script, do you come up with all the ideas, or are you given a theme and then told to write about it? So maybe you can continue your thought process.
Well, on television shows, because you're so confined to 22 minutes, you have no real time to just sort of go off and riff. And so television shows are very tightly outlined. Like every scene, even suggestions of jokes, you'll write like an 8-page outline that the producers go over before you sit down and write the script. When you're writing a screenplay or when you're writing a play, it's very different. And it depends on the subject matter. It depends on how you like to work. When I write screenplays, I'll write a long treatment. I again, because I know I've only got 90 minutes here of screen time. And by page 30, I better establish that the two people are in love. And if they meet on page 20, I now got, okay, I've got 10 pages to get these people to fall in love. How do I do it? How's the best, most elegant, ingenious way of getting them to fall in love in 10 pages? Because they got to be in love, because there's so much other stuff that has to happen. Plays are a little more, at least for me, a little more free form. I try to have very simple outlines and let the characters sort of talk and kind of go in the directions that they want to go. And oftentimes they will take me in places that I hadn't thought of. And so the story will change. I don't want to shoehorn things in, and I don't want to bend my characters in a certain direction because I've got a joke or something coming up. So I tend to be a little more free form, but it depends on the play. I wrote one play which is sort of a sex farce, and so there's a lot of misdirection, and he thinks this and she knows that, and he's scheming this. And so like a lot of pieces that that had to be in place. So that one was really worked out. I did a play where it's a couple. It's like they used to be like sitcom co-stars, like say Sam and Diane 30 years ago, and they haven't spoken in 30 years. And there was resentments and an attraction and that type of thing. And I wondered, well, what happens if you put the two of them together in a hotel room? Do they wind up together or do they wind up apart? Mm-hmm. And I also threw in, since I felt it needed a little bit more, with the advent today of shows being rebooted, like Roseanne and Will and Grace and that type of thing, that the network was offering to reboot their classic sitcom, but only if the two of them would agree to be in it. And so I just started writing, and I had no idea whether at the end I would want them together or apart, or doing the show but not as a couple, or being a couple but not doing the show. And it was very liberating. I just wrote it very, very free form. And I think part of the fun of that is I don't think the audience can guess where it's going, because I didn't know where it was going. It went where it needed to go.
Let's go a little further. Is there an actor or director that you would want to work for, that's either still in the business or has passed on? Anything? And I'm going to just quickly mute everyone, and Ken, if you can come off of mute. Ken, if you can come off of mute.
How do I get on mute?
Oh, I there was some noise in the background, so I did that. I'm sorry.
Okay. I would have loved to have worked with Neil Simon. I would have loved to have worked with Neil Simon. I would have loved to have written on the Dick Van Dyke Show. And this is kind of a fun story. I have a blog. I also have a podcast, Hollywood and Levine, if you would care to listen, where I tell stupid stories like this. But I thought, as a fun exercise for the blog about, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, I would write a spec episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show. And I would give it to Carl and another writer who's still alive, Bill Persky. And I said, I will get their notes, and I will print their notes, whatever they are, you know, whether it's this is a good job or you missed it completely, whatever. And so I wrote this script and I sent it to Carl. Carl never got around to reading it, but Bill Persky did. And Bill Persky called me and I said, okay, so what would you say in your rejection letter to me? And he said, I would buy this. If this was a spec, I would have bought this script. We would have done this script. This was a great script. I would have sent a car for you. I would have hired you. And I thought, like, okay, it's 50 years too late, but that I was a good enough writer to get a Dick Van Dyke Show assignment, which to me was like almost as good as Miami. So I would have loved to have written on the Dick Van Dyke Show.
No, that's fantastic. There is a comment in here of folks who have read your blog, and I think your comment on MASH, if you want to elaborate. I'm sorry, not MASH, Taxi. of how you wish you had been a part of Taxi.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I love Taxi. Again, you got, Alex Rieger, who's clearly a Jewish character, Jim Brooks, who created the Mary Tyler Moore Show, along with Ed Weinberger, Stan Daniels, a lot of Jewish DNA, Jim Burrows directing it. At the time that Taxi was really popular, David and I had an exclusive development deal at another studio. So we were not allowed to write episodes of other shows. But that's one show that I always wanted to write.
No, that's
Yeah, that was a great show. And it's basically forgotten today. It's a shame.
Let's take a last question and then give you some time to put some closing notes to this group who is very enthralled with what you've done and how you think. And by the way, I think they might be looking for some side gigs to give you ideas and have you shoot them down or embrace them. But the last question here is, how much does the script change? And now that I'm learning, I guess for the 22 minutes for TV or 90 minutes for a movie production, how much does the script change when version 1 is given to the staff writers?
It depends on the writer and how good the draft is. There are episodes of MASH. Our first episode of MASH, there was probably 95% of our script was left. There are other shows where there's not a word of the original writer's script. In some cases, you just take the original writer's script and just throw it out and go back to the outline, and the staff just rewrites it from start to finish. There's also, during the course of the week of production, a certain amount of rewriting and polishing. Some things work and some things don't. Like I said, there have been times when we've had a table reading of a script and then just thrown it out and done something else. So it really does depend on the original writer.
No, fantastic here. Maybe I'll just ask everybody if you'd like to come off of mute for folks who haven't asked a question to ask it directly to Ken. Please do so. And maybe all the questions came in already, but if anyone's there, please unmute and ask your question directly to Ken.
Okay. I see Marvin Epstein.
Yeah. Ken, were you a Get Smart fan? Were you in that era where Mel Brooks and Buck Henry and all those guys?
I was a Get Smart fan season 1. I thought season 1 was really funny. By season 2, it was just the same silly jokes over and over. But I loved it season 1 and had a big crush on Barbara Feldon.
As we all did.
Yes, we all did. Yeah. Got a chance to work with her on Cheers, which was really fun. Yeah, cool lady.
Yeah, thank you, Marvin, for that question. Anyone else?
Michael, this is Carrie. Can I ask a question?
Or two. Sure. Go.
Show yourself.
First of all, thank you so much. You are terrific. It really, really was wonderful. One of the most popular shows, obviously, was Seinfeld. But at least from my perspective, it's a show that really didn't have any heart to it. They tried to make sure there was no heart. There's no sentimentality. So what do you think accounts for the astonishing success of Seinfeld?
I think Seinfeld was, the fact that Seinfeld was so funny and and so fresh at a time when there were not a lot of really good, funny comedy shows, was a big factor. On the other hand, I don't agree that it was a show about nothing. It was definitely a show about those people who were pretty much a family and did pretty much care about each other. And they were going through a period of life where, you know, it's fun to be a single person and to be dating and have your friends, that sort of thing. But you reach a certain age and it gets sad. And they were all just on the cusp of that. It's like, you're now at a point in life where you better figure it out. So I do think that there was more to Seinfeld than just the humor. But what's interesting to me is younger people do not relate to Seinfeld. Yeah, they do not get why Seinfeld was so successful. They do relate to Friends. They do. Every new generation. I mean, there are, I think, in the history of sitcoms, 3 sitcoms that will continue to get audiences generation after generation after generation. And those 3 shows are I Love Lucy, MASH, and Friends. Yeah. I think my granddaughter, who was just born 2 weeks ago, will become a Friends fan.
That's fantastic. Just to read a question that came in, Ken, it says, if God is all knowing and all powerful, why is there an evil in the world? And I think
seriously, you're asking a comedy writer that question?
Absolutely, absolutely. We need a little lightness on this call here.
That's kind of above my pay grade, but I have to say it's refreshing to get that question instead of what was Shelley Long really like. So
fair enough. Fair enough there. All right. I guess last call for folks, if you'd like to come off of mute to ask Ken a question directly.
Michael, can I ask another one?
Oh, absolutely.
Ken, what's it like, the transition what Larry David went through from being the writer, that even though his character was written for him, to then be the star of his own show? And how much work is that to actually transition like that?
You know, that's hard to say for me because I have not transitioned myself. You know, Larry David was a stand-up before he became a writer. And he was doing sketch comedy on Fridays, which was ABC's attempt to do Saturday Night Live. So he had already been a performer. So I think it was kind of an easier transition. And Larry David has a very specific character persona that he plays, and he's very comfortable playing that persona. You know, I don't know if you cast Larry David as Falstaff in a Shakespeare play, how well he would do. I'm ready for someone to give me my own TV show, but the phone is just not ringing.
We need to work on that as a community for you. Ken, anything in closing to this group? And I'll just preface in that it's brilliant to share how your mind thinks and how you approach comedy, everything from serving in protecting our country and writing at the top of the barrack, the bunks there, while other folks are doing other stuff, to these Jewish characters, even though they may not have Jewish names, but their values. Anything in closing for this group here, and in looking at the classic sitcoms and movies, to to the things that are coming out today and how we should maybe look at and perceive and anything to your,
I would just I guess close by saying I wish people would just lighten up, that everyone is so overly sensitive now that it's hard to write comedy. One of the things I used to do for my blog and podcast was reviews of award shows, the Oscars and the Emmys. And these were funny, snarky, bitchy reviews. And at the time I wrote them, I mean, the London Times used to run my my review, and the Toronto paper used to run my review, and it was all very well accepted. Well, now, oh my God, I'd be called a racist, I'd be called homophobic, body shaming. I mean, you know, I would just be crushed under all of the criticism. So I don't do it anymore. I just don't do it anymore. I think, like I said, we need to lighten up. You know, humor is very important. I mean, it holds society accountable, and it shines a light on hypocrisy and absurdity, and people need to be able to do that. And when they're not, then I think all of us as a society suffers.
It's a great closing remark there. If we, you know, later in the year, we had a larger panel with different folks that write comedy and produce it, could we invite you back for that and include you?
Sure.
Okay, fantastic. Ken, on behalf of the Sinai Temple Men's Club community, which, as you see, is egalitarian, you know, men and women here, we thank you so much for spending time with us, giving us insight, answering, you know, very deep and broad questions, and just bringing us into a page of your book, A Day in Your Life. And thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
We're all very grateful. And I think tonight was a great evening. Thank you so much for making it.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Now everyone's going to go back and watch the State of the Union.
That's right. Nothing gets more funny than that. And just one announcement for everybody. If you haven't renewed your men's club membership, I'm hoping that next month we can resume in person. So I think we've turned the corner. By the way, I've been wrong before, so I stress on the think. But love to see you on Shabbat at Shul. And once again, next month, I hope we're putting actually together a little bit more serious program of mental health. It will actually be the men's club with the temple. And if that's not the program in person, it will be the month after. So we look forward to seeing everybody, and wishing everyone stay healthy and have a wonderful evening. Very good to see everyone. Take care, everybody.
Michael.
Oh, thank you. I just do the turning the screwdriver on this here. These, you know, Ken tonight and everyone else makes the wonderful evenings, but it's very kind. All right, stay healthy, everyone. Bye-bye.